All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the fascinating science behind why hitting those big financial goals kind of fails to unlock the joy we were promised. We've all heard the old saying, right? Money can't buy happiness. But man, in a world that constantly tells us we just need a little bit more to finally be content, we really need to look at the actual data. So we're going to unpack the biological, economic, and psychological realities of wealth and see what actually happens to our brains when we try to essentially buy our well-being. Which brings us to the ultimate modern question for anyone caught in the daily hustle. What is the exact price tag on happiness? I mean, how much money do we actually need to secure a really flourishing, joyful life? We literally spend decades climbing corporate ladders, taking on side hustles, and stressing over investments, and it's all operating under this one huge assumption, that financial accumulation is just a direct, one-to-one escalator to a better emotional state. But, as you'll see, science paints a much more complex and, frankly, a way more interesting picture than that.
So part 1, the price of happiness and when the curve flattens. Let's get into it.
To really understand our emotional state, we have to look back at this landmark 2010 study by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton. Their research was a massive game-changer for how we view the wealth-happiness gradient. They show that, yes, money absolutely does buy happiness, but, and this is a huge but, only up to a very specific point. Basically, once you hit the baseline required to secure your physiological needs, pay rent, keep the lights on, stay safe, the curve just flattens completely. Money starts showing sharply diminishing returns on our happiness. Obviously, that threshold changes depending on your local cost of living, but the core truth? Once those basic needs are met, adding more money to the pile absolutely does not equal adding more joy to your life.
And the real core of this plateau comes down to this super crucial distinction between what researchers call life evaluation and emotional well-being. Think of life evaluation as basically the resume version of your happiness. If someone asks, hey, how's life going? You kind of mentally scan your house, your bank account, and go, yeah, great. And sure enough, that metric does climb steadily with income. But emotional well-being, that's the actual moment-to-moment stuff. The frequency of laughter, joy, stress, or affection you feel on a random Tuesday afternoon, and that metric completely plateaus after that financial threshold. You could literally double your income, but your daily emotional reality is going to stay exactly the same. Crazy, right? Moving on to part 2, the reality check, the trap of deprivation.
Now, before we talk about how to keep that happiness curve climbing, we really have to take a step back and acknowledge the very harsh realities of people who currently lack basic material needs. This is exactly why we can't just tell everyone to think positive. For severely deprived communities, folks struggling with housing insecurity, food scarcity, or systemic exclusion, the sheer overwhelming biological stress basically consumes all of their cognitive and emotional bandwidth. The physiological systems in our bodies that govern stress, a concept known as allostatic load, they become chronically overactivated. Whether someone is in a wealthy urban center or a developing region, this extreme deprivation severely restricts their capacity to build any sort of well-being. It is just an incredibly steep, almost insurmountable climb.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that while a positive mindset and a good social environment are undeniably helpful, expecting vulnerable people to just thrive without addressing foundational inequalities, well, it unfairly shifts the entire burden onto them. It's essentially victim blaming, right? We have to recognize that psychological buffering cannot replace the fundamental human need for a structurally safe and stable environment. Getting those basic material needs met is an absolute prerequisite for the rest of the journey we're about to discuss.
All right, part 3, the paradigm shift, the health capital model.
Okay, so for those whose basic needs are met, but who find themselves just kind of stuck on that flattened financial curve, it is time for a fundamental shift in how we measure success. Enter Professor Wagner Marcinez and the health capital model from 2026. This model redefines health entirely. It's no longer just, the absence of being sick. Instead, it's defined as a cumulative, lifelong stock of physical, mental, and social assets. It fundamentally flips our worldview. We stop judging our lives by our purchasing power and start measuring them by the robust stock of connections, resilience, and emotional vitality that we've built up over time.
And the true power of this model, it lies in this amazing concept called universality. Think about financial wealth for a second. It's inherently scarce. There's only so much of it to go around, it requires this relentless, exhausting grind to attain, and as we saw, it's subject to diminishing returns. But health capital, that relies on universality. the psychological assets that actually sustain our life satisfaction, things like love, harmony, shared laughter, community, they are infinite. There's no cap on them. Because these assets are fundamentally limitless, it means our happiness curve actually never has to flatten. It can literally climb indefinitely.
Which perfectly sets up part 4. Endless, costless happiness.
And honestly, this is arguably the most empowering revelation of this entire analysis. You can actively generate this infinite health capital in your own daily life, starting right now for exactly $0. Zero. The absolute best, highest-yielding investments in your emotional well-being and biological restoration cost absolutely nothing. See, when we finally step away from the heavily commercialized constraints of modern leisure, where we're constantly being sold this idea that relaxation requires a premium app subscription, a crazy expensive vacation, or some luxury purchase, we discover this massive, continuous reservoir of totally free moments.
So let's walk through exactly how you generate this free happiness. By intentionally working these 5 steps into your routine, you are actively growing your health capital. Number 1, shared family meals with unhurried, unstructured conversation. Just gathering around a simple meal generates this profound sense of psychological safety. Number 2, collective laughter and play. We're talking engaging in humor or storytelling with your kids or your friends. Number 3, immersion in nature. Just taking a walk through a local park and actually observing the seasons. Number 4, acts of altruism and mutual aid, like literally just helping out a neighbor. And finally, number 5, mindful rest. Actively carving out intentional periods of silence and daydreaming, totally away from the insane demands of our work-centric society.
Now, these aren't just fluffy, poetic, feel-good ideas, okay? We are talking about hard, biological return on investment here. Shared meals literally lower your cortisol levels. Play, it triggers immediate neurochemical rewards, just flooding your brain with endorphins and oxytocin. Immersing yourself in green spaces utilizes something called attention restoration theory to rebuild your exhausted cognitive faculties. Altruism physically activates the reward pathways in your brain, and mindful rest recalibrates your entire nervous system. These specific actions actively counteract daily stress, proving that the absolute richest components of a well-lived life simply cannot be bought with a credit card. No way.
So as we leave that old saturation curve behind and embrace the limitless potential of health capital, we really have to ask ourselves a challenging question. If the absolute best investments in your well-being are entirely free, what are you spending your bandwidth on today? Are you going to keep chasing a dollar that has completely lost its emotional purchasing power? Or are you ready to start investing your time and energy into the infinite, costless assets that actually ensure a flourishing life? The choice and the happiness that follows is entirely yours.